I'm a big fan of yours, and
Thank you.
I love horror movies. I love pro wrestling, and so this is gonna be a fun conversation, man.
Okay, good. I
I already
appreciate that.
have like too many questions for you, so I feel like we're gonna have to do a part two later on anyway. Um, I also heard that we have a mutual pal in Rob Liefeld. So
Yeah, I've known
don't you
Rob.
just love that guy?
I've known him over half my life, man. I have big time love for Rob and his son Chase as well.
Yeah, and dude, he's got such an infectious energy. I just love him. I think he's the best. Now we're gonna start off with a warm up question. What's the one question that you always get asked that you hope nobody ever asks again?
Oh my gosh. I don't know. What's your first question? Let's find man, I don't know. I try to keep a real open mind with this. I understand that, like, just because one person asked me a question, that doesn't count for everybody, so everyone should be allowed to ask it. Off the top of my head, I can't think of one, but maybe as we go through, something will pop in there. I mean, I think I've been asked questions that I felt were disrespectful questions. You know what I mean? Like, there's a reason I only did the Jim Rome show once.
Well, I'm going to preface this. All of my questions are intended to be quite respectful. So if they come off as disrespectful, just tell me I'm an asshole, and we will
Nah,
move
man,
on from there.
you guys are good over there. I know your all's site well. My buddy John Lee Brody knows some of the people over there as well. So I got love for y'all over there.
Speaking of which, John Lee Brody, yeah, you just launched a brand new podcast with him. It's called That Was Pretty Scary, which premiered yesterday. I listened to the first episode this morning while I worked out. It's a great debut episode. And
it's a good workout podcast for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And you covered, and I wasn't expecting this, but you covered I Know What You Did Last Summer. Now, most of the episodes that you're going to be covering are you're actually going to be discussing horror movies that you've seen and loved. So this was sort of a special circumstance that you were in, that movie. As someone who said he hates watching himself, were you able to find any enjoyment out of the movie at all, or did you just cringe the whole way through?
No, in retrospect and hindsight and all that stuff and having life experience, I think makes us appreciate things a lot more. I've seen 4 movies that I've been in. But I never watched a single episode of my TV show. I don't like the way my voice sounds. I don't like the way my face looks. You can't see my laptop, but there's a Post-it note over the window where my face is in this conversation, just so I don't have to see me, so that I only see you. So that's the main reason why I don't watch stuff. But sitting down and getting to watch I Know What You Did. And John insisted on it. He said, that has to be our first episode. It's stupid that you've never seen it, and we're doing a horror podcast. And he was right. So I sat down, and as the movie started with that beautiful sort of helicopter shot that was in Northern California, my wife came downstairs and she was like, "Oh my God, is this I Know You Did Last Summer?" And I said, "Yeah, we're going to watch it." She was like, "I can't believe you're watching something you're in." And she sat and watched the whole movie with us, and she hadn't seen it since the premiere. So it was a very surreal experience, seeing my hair that long, seeing those terrible sideburns that I'm so glad I got rid of. Oh, thank you, Lord. And yeah, man, it was a trip, though. It was like going back in time. I mean, look at me, dude. I got gray hair everywhere. I got a gray beard, and back then
Silver
it was all
Fox, man. That's what's going
black
on
and
right now.
luscious back in the 90s. Not anymore.
No, you're rocking it good, man. In fact, I heard you say that you're like, I think that I'm an ugly guy or whatever, and that's just
I
ridiculous.
just don't like my face. I don't think I'm ugly. My wife says I'm handsome, but I just don't like it. I think it looks dumb.
I get it. But I also feel like I have a dumb face, but I don't have, hundreds of thousands of people telling me how handsome I am. So I just have a dumb face. No, one thing I found interesting about what you were talking about on the podcast was you mentioned how the director, Jim Gillespie, was kind of an asshole to you, and that he wanted Jeremy Sisto instead of you. But what I found interesting was in 2017, he's doing this like 20-year anniversary, chat about the movie, and he says that he was the one who wanted to cast you. In fact, I pulled up the exact quote because I found it really interesting that he
Yeah, I
said,
heard that. He
yeah,
said
and
something.
so I was just curious, why do you think he would spin it that way if that wasn't the case? Because you clearly had a different experience than that.
Yeah, I mean, whatever helps him sleep at night, whatever makes him feel good. And I just want him feeling good and like I said, I don't have any ill feelings now. I'm 47 years old. When I was 20 and I turned 21 on that film, it was very frustrating and it made me angry. But it's not like there weren't 1,000 witnesses to how I was treated every day on the set. So I don't know why he would say that, but if that's what he wants to say, that's cool. I mean, when it comes to conflict, my thing is always like, who has a bigger motive to I don't want to call a guy a liar, you know what I mean? But like, I have no reason to make anything up, none whatsoever. So if that's how he chooses to remember it, that we had a good relationship and that he fought for me and treated me good, right on. I happen to know for a fact it was Kevin Williamson that did the fighting. From the executive producer, the studio, the writer of the, like, everybody else told me something different. So either everyone else is lying or the other. But again, I wouldn't be here today and I wouldn't be the man I am today had I not gone through that experience. And I made sure from that movie moving forward that I made sure every director I worked with and every actor I worked with felt empowered, or I was at least doing my damnedest to empower them, because I never wanted to feel like that ever again. And I didn't want anyone else to feel that way. So if I saw Jim today, even if he was like, hey man, I didn't do that, I'd say, okay, right on. And I would just move on. But I don't have anything bad to say about the guy. Everything I said was simply the truth.
Right. Yeah, I don't want to go so far as to call the guy a liar. I just found it more fascinating how he clearly, either, remembered it differently or just had a much different experience than you did or whatever. I just thought that
I mean, like I
20
said,
years ago, you know what I mean? And so, and
whatever,
right. But,
whatever helps him, feel good, those types of experiences, negative experiences, I feel like we tend not to forget. And the mundane ones are the ones that kind of slip our mind. So yeah. I certainly haven't forgotten what I went through on that movie. Yeah. Because it was so raw and crazy, and it's never happened to me on any other film since then. So I know where I'm coming from is based and rooted in reality. And again, you could ask any producer, you could ask the writer, you could ask, Mandalay doesn't exist anymore, but you could ask any of the executives there. Like I know who fought for me.
Yeah. And I think you're exactly right. You really remember those negative, like, I don't want to say any names, but there's been people that that I know they've been complete dickheads to me. And I don't forget it 20 years ago, you know what I mean? And I still remember. I remember what a punk that guy was. Now, I will say another thing that I found interesting was you were talking about how you originally auditioned for Scream, and that led to you getting cast. And I know what you did last summer. Now, I am curious. Do you remember what role you were auditioning for in Scream?
Oh my God, yeah! I was auditioning for Billy for Skeet's role, and I remember it was like, I don't remember what audition it was. Back then, you would audition like 3, 4, 5 times. It would just be these preliminary ones, and then you would producer test and then studio test, and the studio test was the decision, right? And I remember at the producers, I was such a young actor. I was not a child actor. I had very little experience. I was very green. And I remember at the end of the producer session, the note that I got was, when you come tomorrow, try to be a little edgier. And I remember walking out of that office and going, oh my God, I'm fucked. Because I had no edge. Like, I was a very sweet boy. I had a sweet boy face. I was super respectful and didn't mind authority. And that is not Billy at all. And then at the studio test, I remember seeing Skeet walk in, and he just looked amazing. Like, he had a leather jacket on and he had like long messy hair, and he just looked so cool and edgy. And I'm like, hey, this is a sweater vest from Structure that I got at the mall. You know what I mean? Like, I looked like a preppy, like, senior in high school that had never kissed a girl. Yeah. So I had already like psyched myself out, and there was no chance for me to bring any edge to the character whatsoever. And so I rightfully did not book that role.
Meanwhile, yeah, Skeet's over there looking like a guy who climbs through girls' windows at night. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, man, he was sexy boy, man. Skeet, and he still is. I saw him a few years ago in Detroit, and he had a leather jacket on, and his hair looked great, and he was tan and no gray hair. And I was like, ah, damn, you're sexy, brother. He was like, hey, man, thank you. It's so good to see you. And we had a big hug and a big laugh, but he's Skeet, and I'm me, and we are very different looks, so to speak.
Now, were there ever any other sort of like movies that ended up becoming like classic horror movies that you auditioned for that you didn't land for whatever reason?
No, it was either there were either scripts that came my way that I didn't like, or roles that I wanted that they simply didn't want to see me for, based off, like the romantic comedies that I had done and things like that. This business, the Western film industry typecasts everyone, right? Like if you're a writer and you have a successful romantic comedy, your action script isn't even going to get read. Your horror script won't even get read. They won't read it because you do that. If you're an actor, same thing. If you're a director, ask Wes Craven. How long did it take before he got the Violins movie with Meryl Streep? You know what I mean? Like once, it's not like Korea or Japan. Like if you look at those masters of horror out there, guys that did like A Tale of Two Sisters in Korea, or in Japan, like Ringu, like those directors, if you look at their IMDb lists, they've made every kind of movie in the world, from screwball comedies to dramas to actions to horror. If you're an artist, they let you create art. In America, and Christopher Reeve said this a long time ago, but because he was the guy that played Superman, people didn't take it seriously. Once our studio system started making movies based on pre-sales to territories, the art sort of went out the window. And Christopher Reeve's gotten a lot of trouble for saying that, by the way, and damn near blacklisted, because studio execs didn't like hearing that kind of criticism. But he came up in a time where you remembered the studio executives' names years after they were gone because they were artists and they had physically produced movies, whereas now they're publicly traded companies and you don't have to make a movie to say yes or no to one. You don't even have to know how. You just, if you like it, cool. And if you don't, it's gone. So there's a much more, like I said, the word typecasting came into play. So if there was a horror movie I liked, most of the time they were like, yeah, but he's the romantic comedy guy.
Yeah,
so those opportunities just didn't exist.
Yeah. And now back to the podcast. Are there any specific movies that you're the most excited to discuss? And please tell me that you guys are planning on covering The Grudge.
Oh yeah, I'll probably do Grudge for episode 1, season 2, and probably have Sarah on as a guest. We want to have some guests too every once in a while. So I'll have her as a guest for that. Or we'll do I Still Know What You Did Last Summer, and maybe I'll sneak Mackay or Jack Black in there, or someone like that. Or maybe even Danny Cannon, who directed it. I love Danny. I'd run through a wall for that guy. But yeah, definitely Grudge will be on there. We'll probably do Ju-on before we do The Grudge, which is what The Grudge was based off of. The same director, by the way.
Oh, I didn't know there was maybe I knew that and I forgot, but yeah, that's crazy.
Why it was so damn good. That's why Ringu is so much better than The Ring, because it was the Japanese version versus the Americanized version. Or A Tale of Two Sisters, the Korean film, is so far superior to The Uninvited because it's a completely different point of view on the idea, whereas The Grudge is Ju-on. Ju-on is The Grudge. And so it every single moment that you love from the Japanese film, you love in the American one, because it's the same vision from the same master. And that's just rare. But yeah, Grudge will definitely be on there. But to answer your question specifically, I have an affinity for B movies, especially like B horror movies. Mm-hmm. So one of my favorite episodes is Chopping Mall. We've already done it. I don't know if you've ever even heard of this movie.
I've heard of the movie. I have not seen it, but I have heard of this movie.
It is, Roger Corman's wife produced it, and she took the Roger Corman philosophy, which is you have one shot a day that has to be perfect. Everything else, we can just do handheld. Let's see what happens. But one shot a day has to be great. And you can really see it, that in full evidence in Chopping Mall. I think our next episode coming up for like non-Amazon Plus members is The Stuff. I don't know if you've ever heard of The Stuff, but it's a beautiful beat. Michael Moriarty is the lead. Paul Sorvino is in this movie. Like, it has an amazing cast.
I saw hysterical. I know I saw The Stuff when I was a little kid because I had a grandma who let me watch movies that I had no business watching. But the creepiest thing that I remember about The Stuff is the cover. Just that cover where he's like stretched out and everything's like glowing and coming out of his eyes. I love that.
The Stuff is genius. So I love B movies. So like Killer Clowns will for sure be in there.
You know, I Killer Clowns. I got to hang out with the directors of that movie.
Did you really?
Monsterpalooza. Yeah, my cameraman is a giant Killer Clowns fan, and they let him put on an actual clown costume.
Yeah,
and walk around in it. It was incredible. It was so much fun.
There was a saying in this business when I came out here, and I don't mean this in an insulting way. I mean this in a really endearing way. They say Killer Clowns, one of the only films where the cocaine budget was as big as the films. I just always, it was such an 80s quote, right? Like, it was so Miami Vice and like that whole time. And when you're like, how did they come up with this movie? Oh, it must have been because they had, $800,000 worth of cocaine before they made it. So I just thought it was hysterical. I love those movies. I love those.
It's amazing to me what a cult classic that is, and it hasn't been like there's not a sequel or a reboot or none of that yet. It's only a matter of time. It'll happen.
I'm sure, yeah.
But yeah. Now, one thing that I did hear you mention was that you don't want to trash and bash any films on the podcast. Like, you just want to talk about movies that you love, which I totally respect. But with that in mind, I need to know, what's one horror movie that you've seen that absolutely will not be covered on the podcast?
That I have seen. I mean, I know one that I haven't seen that'll never be on there, which was Rob Zombie's The Munsters.
Oh, yeah.
I saw the trailer for that. That was I'm like, did they not do a sound check on this? Like, did they not have any post-production on this movie?
I don't know, man.
So that one won't be on there. But no, I really try to focus on movies that I love. I've never understood all these YouTube channels and podcasts that talk about things they hate. I don't that to me is just trying to make money and exploit something. It just doesn't seem pure to me. It seems very deliberate, and I would rather talk about things that I enjoy than things that I hate. So every movie, even the ones that I give, we have a rating system where we do hooks as ratings, right? Like 1 through 5 hooks. Like Chopping Mall is a 1 hook, but that doesn't mean I hate it. I love it. I'm just trying to be real with the audience. Like, look, they had $50 to make this movie. It's only 84 minutes long, and they made it that short so that they could get an extra screening in movie theaters so that they could make more money. Because if it's short enough, you got more time. So you could throw it in there at an 8 o'clock and a 9:30. And so I love that. And I think that kind of stuff is genius. So even if I give something a low hook rating, it doesn't mean it isn't beloved by me. It just means I got to be real with you. It's it isn't Psycho.
Now I understand what you mean, because I feel that exact same way about like Samurai Cop. Like some of the worst movies of all time. Like, all I needed to do is entertain me. Did it entertain me? Whether it's so bad, dude, that's or what. That's
what They Live mask behind me. John Carpenter.
I love They Live.
A lot of people a lot of people might dump on it, but to me, it's got one of the single greatest moments in cinematic history. When he says, I've come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum. That's more powerful than, frankly, Mike Scarlett, I don't give a damn. You know what I mean? Like, it's such a beautiful moment to me. And so that's the kind of, that I hope helps wrap people's brains around my perspective on these films. They don't all have to be, universally agreed upon, critically acclaimed films. You can make a B movie and I'll fall in love with it.
Yeah. Now that Scream 7 just killed at the box office, no pun intended, I feel like it's only a matter of time before they come calling you for I Know What You Did Last Summer and a legacy sequel, because that's just sort of the trajectory of these sorts of things. But as far as legacy sequels go, if you had the choice between I Know What You Did Last Summer, Scooby Doo, or I don't know, She's All That, which one would you say yes to first?
Well, I said no to She's All That. They already tried that.
Well, that wasn't really a legacy sequel, though, right? I mean, that was more of
Well,
like,
that's how they tried to sell it. But when they kind of pitched me the idea and what they were trying to do, and I guess Miramax really didn't care if I was in it or not. They just sort of like, hey, do you want to be the principal? And I was like, hey, no, thank you. But they even hired my friend Mark to try and get me to like do the movie. And Mark called me after I passed, and he goes, hey, they're making me call you. I just wanted to catch up. I'm not trying to talk you into doing it. And so we just caught up and talked about the House of Yes for 25 minutes. But yeah, so it wouldn't be She's All That because Miramax doesn't care. Scooby, probably not. Although I have learned to love Scooby Doo because it affected so many kids and so many kids loved it, that even though it wasn't the movie we signed on for, like they did the whole bait and switch move on us, right? Like James wrote this amazing script that had every cult reference you had hoped Scooby would have. And it made a lot of people excited. And we landed in Australia. And before Warner Brothers even let us go to our house, they brought us to the production office and gave us the new script, which to me read like a rated G movie and not the film that I wanted to do. So I had to kind of wrap my head around that, find a way to commit totally to that so that I didn't suck. And then when it was over, I was like, all right, that's over and done with. But hearing how well it was received by children and how many times they made their parents watch it with them, I've really learned to love it and appreciate it through their eyes as opposed to my experience, right?
Yeah.
I Know What You Did would be the closest one to that. And granted, they already, like, Original Films announced that Love and I were doing it, but they haven't offered me anything. I sat and met with the director after they made that announcement, which they shouldn't have done, by the way. Sure. But it happens in our business all the time. I sat with the director and she pitched me a cool idea, but we'll see. Like, I haven't read any script and I haven't received any offer. I'm just being all cards on the table. I don't believe in being coy and keeping these silly Hollywood secrets anymore. I'm 47 years old. I don't have time for that. The men in my family don't live that long. So yeah, that would be the closest one if everything kind of fell into place the right way. I love the director. I love Jen Robinson. She did Do Revenge, if that was the title they kept on Netflix. I like her a lot. I thought her idea was pretty cool. We'll have to see what a script looks like because it'll be she won't be writing it. She may do a rewrite, but they have a different writer. So you never know if the director and the writer's ideas are going to coincide and if it's all going to seem cool and fun. Mm-hmm. But that would probably be the closest one that I would go back to. I'm too damn old to do a Scooby Doo. And I would never do She's All That based off.
I don't know that you're too old to do Scooby Doo because I feel like
the thing for me though, from my perspective, so I appreciate where you're coming from, but for me, it's a very easy no because I just feel too old to jump back into that.
I got you. Now, in fact, bringing up Scooby Doo, James Gunn, I think he said that the first cut of Scooby Doo like received an R rating because he said there was one joke that got taken out of context. Do you remember what that joke was?
It was probably a weed joke with Shaggy and Scooby, with that never showing them smoking weed, obviously, but I think they just changed it to like a grill and maybe smoke was coming out of the roof of it. Look, I've never seen the movie, so it's hard for me to tell you. I just remember being there, and I don't like speaking for other people, but people were frustrated a little bit with the limitations that were put on us as far as what jokes we were allowed to tell. There were ascot jokes in there that were removed that were disappointing.
That is too bad. But
it happens,
Yeah.
When it's a publicly traded company, it's a different experience. My generation was the last generation that got private studios, and then Universal sold out to Seagram's, and then Warner Brothers sold out to AOL, which then sold out to someone else. Sony, I think, bought Columbia, I think it was, and Tom Cruise tried to save MGM by buying their library and not letting anybody screw that up, which we're thankful for. So it was just it'd be tricky for me to know exactly what it was, but I don't ever remember there being a rated R cut. I just remember a script, Warner Brothers saying this is going to get an R rating, so that's why we changed the script. So I couldn't be specific, but I'm guessing it was probably had something to do with, Shaggy and Scooby smoking out. And so maybe that's what it was. That's the best guess I could give you.
Yeah, that's a good educated guess. I think it's interesting that you haven't watched Scooby Doo or She's All That, but I am curious. Did you ever see Not Another Teen Movie? Because Chris Evans is pretty much just a parody of your character's act.
I've seen him do scenes from it, but I have not seen that movie. And I remember seeing the sideburns and being like, bro, of all the things you should have said no to, it should have been the sideburns. Everything else was perfect, but like they shouldn't have made him do that. Because Luke Perry had sideburns on point. Like his sideburns were money, and everyone else was a poor comparison, and I was probably the poorest comparison.
No, I'm curious about what is that like as far as like where you reach this level where your characters are so, part of the zeitgeist that not only are they being parodied, but it's being played by somebody who would eventually go on to become like one of the biggest movie stars in the world.
Jesus Christ, didn't he ever?
Yeah, it's gonna be crazy.
I mean, I guess I don't, maybe I just have a different perspective being inside that world. I just want to see actors work. I just want everybody that I like booking jobs. You know what I mean? I don't know Chris, but I like Chris's work. I always have. I remember seeing a scene from that movie that's I think it was just the trailer somebody showed me, and I was laughing while I watched it. I was like, yeah, right on for that guy. And then years later, I was like, hold up, is that dude Captain America? And it blew my mind, but I just want to see talented people work. So anytime a brother or sister, I know, our union isn't what it once was, and it's not really like a family anymore. It's much more competitive, and award shows kind of do that, which is why I don't support award shows. But I was from the old school. Like Peter Falk brought me up in his game on a movie, and he was of the Cassavetes era, and it was brothers and sisters looking out for one another. It was us against the studios, and now it's much more, hey, let me get my studio deal and screw everyone else. And I'm just not that. I'm an old school guy to my own detriment at times. So I'm just happy to see cats work that I respect. Like I've never met Sam Rockwell, but I'll watch everything he's in. I think every time he plays a role, he's friggin' perfect. He's just perfect, man. So yeah, I'm just happy to see actors work. That's all.
Yeah. I do have to bring up just how freaking cool it is that you're actually like canon in Star Wars. That's I mean, clearly I love some Star Wars. Now that Katie Sackhoff, yeah, now that she gets to like make the jump to live action as Bo-Katan, are you hoping to make the live action jump as Kanan?
No, Kanan's story, at least for me, is done. I thought it ended beautifully. It made people cry. I was very happy for that. I don't mean that like a jerk. Our goal was to make you cry. I didn't even want to do the little voiceover in the last Star Wars movie because I thought it felt forced. And no, I think
pun intended, right?
Yeah, well, not intended. Yeah, my bad. But yeah, to me, every time Kanan, I'm asked to do a Kanan, or there's more Kanan, it waters down what was a beautiful ending. An ending, by the way, that I had nothing to do with. There's no dialogue there. That was all the artists and the director and the writers and the music. And people come up to me and they're like, you were so amazing in that. I'm like, I wasn't even there. Like, I'll let the animators know. I did all the other stuff. There's no vocal work in that. It's this amazing, powerful moment. So for me, that story's been told and it's done, and I wouldn't have any interest in doing that. And it would be weird to play a different character in that universe. So I don't have any ambition to be in the Star Wars universe.
I got you. Now, I wanted to save wrestling for last because I knew once we got on the wrestling tangent that
30-minute conversation,
we wouldn't go back to it. And in fact, I feel like even though you've never met me before in your life, I've known you for a long time. I feel like we're sort of kindred spirits because I'm a big fan of your dad's work because I did stand-up comedy. I started doing stand-up in 2009. That's what got me this hosting job at ComicBook.com. I was also a pro wrestler, so I used to wrestle. Yeah, I wrestled for Impact in 2003, and then I wrote for Impact in 2017. What? Yeah.
What?
I know. So we have a lot of similarities, and I just feel like we would be buddies.
I think comedy and wrestling are so heavily connected, and
They're
I
the
think they're
exact
the
same thing.
two purest forms of art in the entertainment industry.
I used to make the joke that when I transitioned into stand up, that I pretty much just traded physical pain for emotional.
Yes, you did.
That's
Yes,
all.
you did.
That's all I did, man. But yeah, no, I think that I think you're spot on. I think they're so similar. There's so many things. Sorry, I'm trying to start my audio recording on a, just in case there's a
Take your
hiccup
time.
with saving the video file. I feel like there's so many similarities, and living the two lifestyles, because so I started wrestling. I was trained. I don't even know if you know who this is. You remember Eddie Gilbert, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I was trained by Doug Gilbert, his little brother, and
Okay.
yeah. So I was trained by him when I was a senior in high school. Man, I was like,
Wow.
yeah, I was
Wow.
obsessed with wrestling. Nobody could tell me that I couldn't do it. So I ended up, and I'm so
And you
small.
did it.
I'm
And you
so
did it.
yeah. I did, man. It was weird. It was one of those things where I did it. I ended up doing, as far as I got was like doing like dark matches and doing
Who
like
cares?
matches on
It doesn't
Explosion
matter
for
what
TNA.
level, man. Like it's such an accomplishment to get in a ring where there's people and they're actually watching. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it doesn't I don't dump on any. One of my best friends is like a dark match king, the Hollywood hunk, Ryan Nemeth. You know what I mean? Like I
Yeah.
love him. I knew his brother. I used to work with his brother when I worked at WWE. So my respect for wrestlers at every level is the same. You can have the WWE championship or you can be on a dark match. I have the same level of respect for the sacrifice, the commitment, the discipline, because there is sacrifice. Sacrifice time away from your friends, time in the gym, time breaking your body down while it's you're constantly recovering from one injury while you have another. Like I have nothing but the utmost respect for those men and women that go in there and take those bumps.
Yeah, the whole reason that I stopped wrestling was because I broke my back.
Oh,
Yeah.
God.
So I broke my back, and then and not that, and I still came back and wrestled a little bit more after that. I was out for like, I mean, dude, it sucked. I've never felt pain. Like I broke my L5 and my S1, and that was the absolute worst thing that I've ever done. And couldn't feel my legs. Like I had nerve damage in my left leg for years because of that. But
Wow.
it
Wow.
really, but I was like 22. And so I was like, oh my, like, I guess I should go do something else and maybe use my brain or something. So I ended up going and getting my English degree, and I was going to just be a professor. And I, on a whim, I started doing stand up at Zany's in Nashville. And somehow it just took off, and I started opening up for a bunch of people and traveling. And I did a full-time living off of stand up for like 7 years before I started working with ComicBook.com. So it's pretty wild. And then to go, and I had a lot of friends that were wrestlers. Dutch Mantel is basically like my grandpa. And
Wow,
so when
dude.
he's
What a
yeah, so
legend he
Jeff,
is.
yeah, when Jeff Jarrett brought him back in Impact in 2017, I had been helping him write his one-man show, and so he asked me if I wanted to come write at Impact, and I was like, okay. So I was trying to do that while I was doing
One of
stuff
the
with
greatest
comedy.
mustaches in the history of mustaches.
It's amazing. It's
Yeah.
incredible. It's a great
Yeah.
mustache. We should all be envious of a
Oh, I
man that
am.
can
I
draw a
believe me,
mustache
I
like
am. My
that.
mustache sucks.
I actually grow a really mean mustache when I but it ages me too much. I can't, like, it shows my real age. I don't like that. So I keep it trim. I can't grow hair anywhere else though. It's only the mustache. It's like a
It's all right.
broom right here, and then it's just
It's a
baby.
powerful broom. A powerful broom.
So what I want to know. So WWE 2K23 came out this week. Are you playing it all?
You know, I just downloaded it. I was gonna start playing yesterday, and then I'm a dad to two kids, so that didn't happen. So I have to. They have the day off from school today, so it won't happen today either. But tomorrow, both their little butts are back in school, so I'll get to do the John Cena story mode. I loved the last one with Ray Ray and that whole story. I loved the if you lost to Eddie, he would rip your mask off like he was
Yeah.
doing in WCW back in the day. That was so evil and horrible. But I loved it. So I really enjoy their games, especially lately. And yeah, I'll be playing it tomorrow.
I love what they've done with the showcase this year, because it's like it's John Cena, and you actually have to beat John Cena, right? It's like it's always been like you play as Ray the whole time through, but now it's like all of his opponents that you have to beat, and then
Oh, I didn't know that. Now you tell
yeah.
me, is this true? I heard that if you beat the game on a certain level, you get Super Cena and you actually can't see him. Is this
It's
true?
amazing. It's incredible, dude.
Oh
I
my.
love it so much. It's the best. I already did it. I mean, I gotta admit, I've been so useless this week since it came out. I've done I canceled all my other interviews.
Oh,
Only Freddie Prinze Jr. could
we're
pry me
total,
away.
we're total dorks, man. That's amazing. I love it. I love it. I love it.
Do you ever make yourself on the game? If so, Doug, what's your
Oh
wrestling
yeah, dude. I'm always a luchador. My name is El Güey. That means the dude. And I'm the greatest luchador that ever lived. So
Of
you
course.
haven't heard of me? You haven't heard of me online?
I'm gonna
Goodness
be on the
gracious.
lookout. Do you upload your character, because I want to see it?
Yeah.
If you upload your character, I'm gonna download him and I'm gonna put him in my made up promotion.
Oh
That
yeah, you gotta have El Güey. Like he's a great mid carder, man. He's mid carder all the way.
all
He's
right.
an
As
future
soon as you
intercontinental
upload him,
champion.
I'm gonna download him. And speaking of owning your own promotion, I know you don't like to talk much about the wrestling promotion you're working on until there's sort of ink to paper, and I totally respect that. But what I want to know is, like, what are the big glaring mistakes that you see WWE or AEW making that you want to capitalize on? Like, what are they not offering as a wrestling promotion that you feel like you could offer when yours is ready and given the chance?
I got to be real with you. When I first announced it, I wasn't honest 100% with what I wanted to do because I didn't want people to crap all over it before it happened. So mine isn't going to be similar to that style. It will feel more, I don't want to say too much. Every time I say something, either I lose a wrestler that I wanted, or I see the idea that I said in a worse version of it on either WWE or AEW. So I feel like they're listening right now. As far as like what they do wrong, look, you can criticize anything till we're all blue in the face. I think booking is very important, and I think giving wrestlers a reason to fight is the most important. So when there is motivation, just like in a movie, you are then compelled to watch. So let's use last night's AEW as an example. 4 corners, 4 pillars, MJF's rebar mitzvah, right? He comes out there to celebrate himself and his life, and he's getting kisses on the cheek and kissing the girls, and he's talking to the people, and he's even got the Hanukkah colors. It's blue and white all over, confetti, and then out comes Jack Perry, or Jungle Boy Jack Perry. I prefer to call him Jack, but it makes him sound more like a man, right? I don't like the Jungle Boy thing. But he comes out, and he sits back in the opposite corner from Max, right? So now 2 of the pillars, 2 of the starting founding members of AEW, as far as the youth goes, I'm not counting Jericho, right? Jericho is the foundation that it is now built upon, right? So respect where credit is due. Right. But these are the young pillars that the company is going to depend and rely on. And the crowd has known this, the internet's known this, and now one at a time. Next comes Sammy Guevara. He comes out, and he's not necessarily beloved, but because the crowd's starting to see what's going on, he's getting a really positive reaction. And he's talking about having to work at Whataburger and Subway, and now he's here, and he wasn't given anything. He was going to be the bump guy, which I wish he wouldn't have said that. I don't like when they use inside terms like that, but still, it was a good little promo for him, and he got over. And then all of a sudden, here comes Darby, right? And Darby's not the strongest on the microphone, but if you kind of leave him alone and let him do his own thing, he can communicate a strong message, right? So now we have all 4 of these young warriors in there, and they're in 4 different corners, and they're the 4 pillars of the company, and each and every one of them has a reason to fight. So I'll watch any one of them in a program with MJF, and I'll root for both. I just don't want anyone to get hurt for real. Mm-hmm. And I want Max to stay champion forever, because I think heel champions are a better story, because then everyone else is climbing the mountain, right? And you can get a bunch of baby faces over that way. So that's when it's done really well. When it's just 2 guys or 2 girls, and they're constantly changing their reason to fight, or changing their wardrobe, or changing their names, or changing their whole motivation for being there, it's very hard for an audience to get behind that person. The same as a television show when you're not sure the network's going to pick it up for a second season. What the hell am I going to commit my time to watch your hour of drama if you're not committed to it either? It's a big reason why a lot of actors want guaranteed contracts, because then it demands studio accountability. Do you love this show enough to keep it on for 5 years? Do you, because we're not allowed to work outside the show. Those are exclusive contracts and we miss out on everything, but you can just get rid of us at any time. So a lot of audiences check out and tune out because they're like, well, they're not committed, so why should I be committed? Well, that same rule applies in wrestling. If we don't feel that the company is behind Gunther, then why am I behind Gunther? I'm talking WWE now, they're Intercontinental Champion. Yeah. If you're going to keep changing Legado del Fantasma, let's say, if you're going to change him 10 times, how is he going to get that foundational crowd? You know what I mean? Like, I wasn't hip to him on Lucha Underground, right? I had never seen that Ricochet Fantasma match in Lucha Underground that everybody raves about. The first time I saw it, I think they called it the World Cup on Friday Night SmackDown. And I'm calling my friend, I'm like, what the hell? He's like, bro, this is the Lucha Underground match. You didn't see that? I was like, dude, get me hip to this match. I'm an idiot. I didn't know. But I would love for them to give him a consistent and steady push as him, as this character, and not change him 10 times. Because that's when I feel, in the wrestling business, they would call it dead money, which isn't fair because you killed him.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like,
well, and especially when characters
10 times.
And especially when characters can go through so many different transitions, right? You see that Jericho's a perfect example of somebody who, he hasn't gone through 20 different names, but he's gone through like these different like gimmicks that he's
a
just
unicorn. He's a unicorn. No one else can pull that off.
Undertaker. I would argue Undertaker can do it.
He only did it once. American Badass, and then he went back to the Dead Man.
But when he goes back to the Dead Man, it wasn't exactly like the same Dead Man that it was in the 90s. And I would argue that he's got different versions of the Dead Man, right? He's got he had the mask, the Phantasm mask. He had like the Devil Worshiper guy. He had, you know what I mean? There were like different variations of the Dead Man.
Chris to me is each.
I'm
one
not
is
arguing
so
that Chris. I'm not arguing that Chris is a unicorn.
Because Chris had the list.
Yeah.
Chris had, the champagne one. Chris had, he's still doing it now. So Chris is a unicorn, right? And if everyone does that, then it's no longer, then everyone's a unicorn and unicorns aren't special. Then we start looking for the horse without the horn on its head, right? So he has to be allowed to do that. So the other ones, I feel like you have to give them a chance and a consistent chance at being who they're comfortable being, whether it's themselves or a version of themselves or a projected caricature that they need to get out there, right?
Yeah.
So consistency, I think, is the key to success. And on a live show, when WWE was basically the only show in town, although there were other promotions, but they were the big dog, they weren't subject to any of those philosophies. They could legitimately do whatever they wanted, whenever they wanted, but it wasn't necessarily conducive to wrestler success as an individual. Yep. So that's what, if I'm going to have like a major criticism, it would be that. But you could apply that criticism to any Law and Order, any episode of ER, any movie you've seen, any Marvel, you know what I mean? Like, that it is what it is. I still love it. I still watch it. I still hope for it to be great. It's just not always great. That's all.
Now, do you have a time frame in mind for like when you want to announce some more things? Is that coming this year, for example?
Yeah, there'll be a big announcement right around WrestleMania.
Oh, it's soon then.
Yeah, the deal's not done. I haven't signed it yet, but our contract looks good, and it's more than just my show. It's an entire sort of network and opportunity to showcase a lot of independent wrestling. And then once I establish that, there'll then be the path for what I need to do. But there's ownership involved in that, and I'll be heavily involved in that, and that'll probably get released around WrestleMania. But that's legit all I can say. I'm telling you, every time I've mentioned a wrestler and every time I've given any hint whatsoever, I either lose the wrestler the very next day or the idea is on TV.
I don't want any of that. I don't want to jinx anything. I
appreciate
totally
it.
I respect that. And you know, if you ever need a backstage producer, let me know. I'm happy to come in and help. Just for free, just to be there, just for that.
The grandson of Dutch Mantel is always welcome. Is always welcome.
Dude, that I've learned so much just hanging around that guy for 20 years. I love him.
All those old schoolers are the best, man. Like that's how when I signed with WWE, I didn't know how to write wrestling, man. I knew how to write monologues, which they call promos. That's all I knew how to do. And it wasn't until I started talking to the Arn Andersons, the Dean Malenkos, the Barry Windham was another guy I had a great conversation with. Obviously, Vince McMahon, Hunter, who we didn't always get along, but he was right every time. Even when I disagreed with him, he was friggin' right. So I learned a lot, and I got a lot better by the time I left than when I got there. Yeah. But I was still proud of the work I did when I did work there.
Now, talking about the importance of booking, you know, what are the biggest differences in storytelling that you see between like Tony Khan and Triple H? You know, and do you have a preference over one or the other?
It more depends on talent. I mean, I know MJF writes for himself. I know MJF's stories are his stories. I know that. You can just tell. It's organic, it's authentic, it's from him. He breaks rules that you shouldn't break, but because of his commitment to the character, it's 100% okay.
Yep.
So like that story he did with CM Punk, to me, was the best wrestling story told in the last 10 years. I loved that. That said, WWE has told some wonderful stories as well, but theirs are definitely more scripted. Only John Cena's allowed to kind of shoot promo, you know what I mean? Like what he did to Austin Theory was the same thing he did for Roman Reigns, where he's kind of breaking the fourth wall. I feel like if a lot of younger wrestlers did that, they get in a lot of trouble when they'd go backstage. But John never needed help with that kind of stuff. Like I never wrote a John Cena promo when I was there. When I had ran promo class, John Cena didn't need to come in and work on his promo skills. He was the best actor on their damn roster. He knew how to do it by himself.
Yeah.
So, you know, one is just more scripted than the other. So it just depends on what style you like. If you don't mind seeing human error and human mistakes, then AEW is the one you prefer.
Right.
If you like a more polished, perfect, but maybe not as an authentic character, then WWE is what you prefer. But this whole philosophy of you have to pick one over the other is dead to me. It's never, I am a wrestling fan, period. Yep. I'm not a WWE fan. I'm not an AEW fan. I'm not a TNA fan. I'm not a New Japan Pro Wrestling fan. I'm not a Progress fan. I watch wrestling. I'm not an NWA fan. I just like NWA. I'm not a fan of any one particular brand. If you have someone that I like, I'm going to watch you. I'm going to watch your show. If you don't, I won't. It's that simple. You know what I mean? So I love wrestling. I know what these men and women do to their bodies. I respect what they go through so much. So yeah, man, I'm almost 50 years old. When I'm almost 60 years old, I'll have this exact same conversation and feel the exact same way. I love it.
I think that's a great answer. And I think it totally is dependent on the wrestler, right? Because it's sort of like stand-up. And, you know, bringing it back to that, where it's like some guys can go up and they can just, you know, riff like off the top of their heads. And then other guys are like, it's like carefully crafted down to the word. You know what I mean? And it's just a different style, and it's just how your brain works. I am somebody like live situations make me nervous as shit, man. I can't do it because I'm just
no crowd work for you. No crowd work.
I can do it with enough practice, but I'm not my most comfortable with that. I like knowing exactly where I'm going to go and how I'm going to get there, and pre-thinking these things out. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. It's the difference between like, there's two Seattle comedians that I love, Adam Ray and Jeff Dye. Jeff Dye has never wasted a word on stage. Not even one. He's never said,
Yeah.
He's never said the word on stage. That's insane to me. He is on a pad and he knows exactly where he wants to be. Adam Ray will give you an hour of crowd work and just, hey man, what's your deal? And then in 3 seconds, he's just killing it. You know what I mean? So they're very different styles, but I love both men so much. Jeff has a great, speaking of wrestling and comedy, Jeff used to date Becky before she got married, Becky Lynch.
Yeah.
He tells this beautiful story of, it's horrible to date a professional wrestler because most people don't watch wrestling. It's a smaller audience, right? So he'll be walking around with, or back then would be walking around with his girlfriend at the time, and she'd have black eyes and bruises, and people are looking at him, and he's like, no, I did not do that. Ric Flair's daughter did that, which sounds like a bigger lie.
Right.
So it's, I love both formats. I think the audience lets you know in wrestling and in comedy exactly how they feel about you in the most honest and quickest way possible. Like, I have time to decide how I feel about my performance. A movie doesn't come out for a year after I make it. I've already decided how I feel. If I love it, you could be like, Freddie, you suck. That movie sucked. You are not affecting my feelings or my opinion in any way, shape, or form. If I hated the movie and you're like, man, you were so good in that, I'm like, man, I sucked in that. In my head, I go, but thank you. I appreciate that. I've had time on stage. If they don't laugh, it's because they don't like you. And that's brutal, man. So I would never do it. I would never get on stage. I don't have the body to ever wrestle because I would just break right away. So I don't get to do either one of those things. So I'm stuck making movies for you jerks.
I think I think you could do stand-up comedy. You're quick enough for it. I think that you can.
That was well, even if I could, that's more a personal choice, right? Like, I never want to place my feet where my father's feet were first.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
No, I completely think that makes sense and respect that. And the fact that, like, you sort of like wanted to forge ahead with your own legacy and not even be compared in that way. Because pro wrestling, we see that all the time with like second generation guys, third generation guys, stuff like that, and you can't get away from it. If you have a famous dad, you'll always be compared in that field if that's what you venture into.
Yeah, the only thing I had going for me was, outside of comedy, my dad couldn't act, so I didn't have to worry about comparisons in that regard. But he was always going to be funnier than me, so I couldn't hang there. But I saw the $1 Million ripoff. He didn't get drama. He didn't know how to pull it off. So that was like, yeah, I think I'll take this space and let him keep that space.
Yeah, no, I think that was probably a good call on your part. Now, speaking of back to, wrestlers and living the gimmick and, what I don't know if you saw this, but recently Undertaker, that guy's been living his best life. He's more or less dropped the gimmick and giving actual interviews. And recently he criticized like how most wrestlers today are not living the gimmick. So clearly, you agree with him. And I'm like you, because I think MJF is the best thing to come out of pro wrestling in quite a while. And it's simply because the guy will not break. It's like what great magicians would do back in the day. You know what I mean? And the old school guy. I love that old school mentality. I think Undertaker did it right as far as being a blueprint for how wrestlers, should be today. Like, be the character. And then when you're retired, then you release a tell-all book. Then you do the interviews and stuff like that. You know what I mean? But
I will say this, though. The world has evolved so quickly that new school wrestlers like Sami Zayn doesn't live the gimmick.
Yeah.
And Sami Zayn, apart from that MJF CM Punk story, just finished telling the greatest story that the WWE's told in 25 years. I mean, everything he did, and he's out of character when he speaks to Ariel Helwani. Well, you know what I'm saying? So there is a way, I think, that can still work, so long as your work on camera is so clean that it's untouchable. Mm-hmm. It's untouchable because we don't want to get our dirty fingers on it and mess it up. And that's what Sammy was able to pull off. Sammy and Max, to me, are the two single best performers in professional wrestling today and have been for quite some time.
Yeah. That is, bringing up Sammy, I love that you brought him up, because there has been this like groundswell for him that almost reminds me of how organically popular Bryan Danielson got a few years back, right? And then we've got Cody, who's pretty, he's pretty famously been told, you're not the guy. right? And then he leaves WWE. He becomes more popular than he was, and he comes back and he's got this rocket strapped to him now. It's a really interesting storm brewing around the top spot in WWE right now. Do you think Cody is the right guy to dethrone Roman Reigns, or are you more of like in the Sammy camp where you want to see Sammy take it?
They painted themselves in a corner because they didn't
But
know.
it's a good problem to have.
Sure, but I don't think they knew that the bloodline and Sammy was going to take off the way it did.
Yeah.
And then working that out with Cody's contract, it's like they have two baby faces on a collision course, and WWE hates that. They hate two baby faces fighting. So somebody's going to have to flip. And I feel like in order to pull that off, it has to be Cody. And he's already kind of shown it when Paul Heyman went in on him. And you kind of saw Cody like taking some of those bullets, right? And absorbing that pain. And that's the kind of pain that can make you flip and turn. And he is the American nightmare. So there is an opportunity there, but I don't know how you do the right version of Sammy or Cody. I don't know what the right answer is. So they really are boxed in a little bit. It has to be Cody because I feel the promise has been made, right? Otherwise he would have re-signed.
Yeah.
So now granted, things can obviously change all the time, but I think once Cody wins, and I'm sure he's going to win, that would be so weird if he didn't. Then you have to have a thing where Sammy must be next in line. Otherwise, you're wasting all that greatness that he's put in the last year and all the commitment from the fans who believe in him. To squander that would be a problem. So someone has to be in a WWE old school philosophy, someone has to be the heel. Now, maybe I'm wrong, and Triple H is like, hey, screw that. We're going to have two baby faces. You're going to cheer for whoever you want, and may the best man win. And that can be awesome too, man. It really can. We've had we've had that happen before. It's just rare, right?
Yeah.
So I honestly don't know how to answer that question and be like the wrestling guru, because both guys are perfect to be champion, but on completely opposite ends of the spectrum. You know what I mean? It's like one is Superman and one is Bizarro Superman. You know what I mean? So they're both equally powerful. They're just on opposite ends of the spectrum. One is a made man who may have had to earn it, but he's legacy. And I can speak to that, being a legacy kid, right? Like there are different opportunities for men like us than there are for men like Sammy. I received opportunities other actors may not have received, right? So you could put that on Cody as well, even though he's busted his ass, even though I busted my ass. And then there's Sammy, who's had to kick, claw, fight, scratch, bleed, everything just to get noticed. The Academy Awards were funny because it was like this celebration of the forgotten. It was this celebration of all these actors whose agents didn't believe in them, who wouldn't return their emails, who wouldn't return their calls, who passed them down to their junior agent, which is like the most dirty thing you can do, to go from I believe in you to whatever, let this guy take, because it's such a money gig for them, right?
Yeah.
So there's this like energy in Hollywood right now of like, hey, we screwed up. Like, it doesn't just have to be pre-sale movie stars. There are talented, qualified actors. You look at Michelle Yeoh's speech out there, and I'm just sitting there like, yes. Studios are like, oh my God, she has a wrinkle. We have to CGI that wrinkle out. And if we don't have the budget to do that, then we'll just hire a younger actress. Like that, those are real conversations that happen in this business. And when you saw all these people win, it was almost like, hey, you don't have to be completely superficial to make movies. Like you can actually hire human beings, and they can have flaws. And that to me is Sami Zayn. He is a flawed character. He is not perfect. And God damn it, I love him. And I'm going to love him forever for that. Forever. I met him once years before this push ever happened. And I was there visiting Baron Corbin. It was just a house show. We can end with this if you want. And we were just BSing, and Corbin had a match against Roman. And so he left, and I'm just sitting there by myself, just chilling, said what's up to Nikki and Brie, because I knew them from back in the day, met a couple other wrestlers. And Sammy just came up and sat next to me and was like, hey man, you're sitting alone. How are you? And I was like, hey, I'm Freddie. He goes, I'm Sammy. Nice to meet you. And we just talked for like 40. I missed the match. I didn't see any of the house show. We sat for like an hour and 45 minutes and just talked. And I'm like, man, this guy is amazing. How come he's not getting a push? And then all of a sudden you see this and you're just like, holy crap. And I love him as much as Max. I think they're both incredibly talented. I wish they could wrestle, which could never happen. But that would be my dream match. Maxwell Jacob Friedman versus Sami Zayn.
One of these days it might happen.
Hey, well, you
never say never in wrestling. Well, one last quick question, man. And thank you so much for your time, man. This has been amazing. I've loved talking to you. I knew that we were going to get along splendidly. I just had a feeling.
It's just two dorks. That's all.
Do you think Rock's going to show up at Mania?
No, I don't.
So?
I don't think so. No. I don't know what the story would be. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think the Roman, it isn't necessary. I think you could bring him in after Mania after Roman loses, you know what I mean? And the bloodline starts to fall apart, and then The Rock can come in and show you what being Samoan is all about and what family is all about. And you don't do this to these guys. And then maybe he puts Solo Sikoa over somehow, you know what I mean? But I don't think he'll show up at Mania. I think you keep that special between Roman and Cody. And if anyone gets involved, it's bloodline people. But I think if you bring The Rock in there, he casts the biggest shadow, not in wrestling, but in Hollywood too. And not just figuratively, but literally. So I don't think it would be good for either one of those guys. The Rock he's the one. My grandma might hate him. She died hating him because he became the corporate champion and she believed the storylines.
Yes.
So she hates him, but everybody else loves him.
That's awesome. Well, Freddie, I don't want to take up any more of your time. This was amazing. Thank you so much. And I can't wait for the next episode of your podcast. I really love the first one.
And my wrestling podcast, Wrestling with Freddie, comes back in April. So if you guys want to nerd out on wrestling, you can listen to that too.
Heck yeah. Awesome. I'm going to listen to both of them, man. Thank you so much.
All right, man.